If you're buying those coco coir moss poles off Amazon and you're spending between $12 and $20, you might just be better off buying an 8-foot cedar plank from Home Depot for $7. Let me show you why your plant will thank you. I think many people have a fundamental misunderstanding of how fast a large form Monstera Deliciosa can grow. Given the proper lighting, water, and fertilizer, these plants will grow fast and large. With each new leaf, the stem gets thicker and thicker, and at some point it'll actually start to rival the thickness of some of those coco coir poles themselves. With that round surface, it will be very easy for this plant to sneak past your moss pole. Take a look at this picture. Was this moss pole placed in the right spot? I would say yes, but right now it's no longer serving its purpose of supporting the backside of the plant. This section that's highlighted here has snuck away from the moss pole, and now it's not providing the right support for the plant. The plant is going to continue growing in this direction, and now the owner has no choice but to continue to wrap the stem and the petioles in a position that's probably going to compromise how this plant is going to end up looking in the far future. The other option would be to move the moss pole or put in another moss pole in this position here, but I really don't think that's something that a lot of plant parents want to be doing continuously. Untying everything and trying to yank it back into position is also an option, but there are a lot of factors at play that might make that idea maybe not the best choice for the overall health of the plant. This is why I'm such a huge fan of a wide plank. A perfectly placed plank, man, I gotta chill with the alliteration. A perfectly placed plank will allow your plant to climb up the surface in its normal growth pattern without needing to readjust the plant too much to stay in the right position. So if you follow the pattern on this plant, it keeps splitting left, right, and it will continue to do so. There hasn't been any need to adjust this plant or really even needed to tie up any of the last several leaves. With the plank in the middle, this growth pattern will just continue, hopefully forever. But let's talk about the aerial roots. Personally, when it comes to large form Monstera Deliciosa, I do not care about the aerial roots. Whenever someone mentions aerial roots, it's always in the context of how the plant uses those aerial roots in the wild. But really, that's none of my business right now. I only want to talk about practically and specifically how are the aerial roots going to help me. And the truth is, they can't. They can only help me find the backside of the plant. Your Monstera Deliciosa just needs to be stable. That's it. So what are your aerial roots going to do if they're up against the plank? Well, they're just going to do whatever they're going to do. You can't really control where they'll go, but this is probably what it will look like. Some aerial roots will shoot out to the left, some will go out to the right, and others will hit the cedar pole and go straight down and add to the root system within the soil. With this plant, your aerial roots really do not need to enter your moss pole or your coir pole for some sort of magical stability. And to be honest, they rarely ever do. Yes, moss poles can be beneficial, but you do have to be managing the moisture levels, which might look like watering every 3 days, and you'll probably be having to manage the position of the stem of the plant much more frequently. It's just a lot to manage. Whenever I discuss some of the pain points of using moss poles on my TikTok account, hundreds of people chime in and let me know that they're unable to keep their moss pole moist, or those stackable poles become unstable, or generally their roots aren't actually digging into their moss pole. Cedar is an extremely rot-resistant wood, and this plank is not going to rot in the soil before the plant reaches the top. And obviously, while there's no great way to extend a cedar plank, I don't see this Monstera reaching the top of the plank within the next 3 years. And besides, this plank can only be repot maybe 2 times before it becomes impossible to manage. There's not really any pot sizes bigger than this, at least not for the typical consumer, but don't take my word for it.
So I've had this Monstera, or Monsteras plural, who I've nicknamed affectionately Big Boy, for about 2.5 years. Now for the first year or so, Big Boy did not have any supports at all, which of course led to Big Boy attempting to crawl out of the pot. I did think about a moss pole. However, the sort of upkeep involved with a moss pole, having to keep it damp, also just the functionality of a moss pole didn't really make sense to me, as that's not how monsteras grow in nature. I think there's some misconceptions around how monsteras climb up trees and what aerial roots, what their actual function is. And Monsteras, from what I've seen, they send their roots down the tree, both as a support, but they send them down to the soil to then create a typical root system underground. So the moss pole thing never really made sense to me for that reason. And I went with ladders instead. Now, the reason that I went with ladders instead of planks was simply the cost. I wanted the benefits of a plank in terms of the width so that the stem has a little bit of room to sort of wiggle around as they do. But I didn't want to pay for 14-foot long boards because my ceilings are very tall, and I did not want to rely on putting them into the pot because Big Boy had gone so horizontally anyway. So I bought a bunch of garden stakes. I think they were $5 a pop. I think the whole thing cost about $60 for the 3 ladders all together, and I custom cut them depending on where they were going to go because I have a pitched roof. So the roof is at a slightly different height depending on the depth from the window. I think that moss poles make sense if you want to propagate your plant, right? Because that's just built-in air layering and you can chop and prop wherever you want to. But without that, I just don't see the need for a moss pole. It doesn't benefit the plant as long as you're putting the aerial roots back into the pot, which I do eventually once they get long enough. But what it really comes down to me is cost and laziness. I am thrifty and I am lazy, and I do not want to do anything that would counteract those 2 qualities.
Moss poles are not the be-all end-all to all of your climbing airway needs, and she's kidding. Moss poles are not the be-all end-all to all of your... Oh my. Rest in peace, Big Boy. You'll be missed. You can make your own Monstera into the next Big Boy, but you do have to start off with the perfect placement of your plant. Check out this video, because once you get that down, it's clear sailing from there. Check out Champion of Mediocre Plants, and I'll see you next time.